Good morning, Tricks from the Foxerie back again with another video for you. This is episode number 8, Exploring Social Confidence. We're going to continue on with our model of ego development, building on the last video, building up our understanding of our own development to figure out why or where we are not doing so well with social confidence. So let's start with the ubiquitous circle diagram that we have come to love in every video. This circle is looking very good, looking very circular. Nice. And we called this in previous videos It World. Id, if you're into your Freudian terms. And It World is very childish. It's all our basic needs. In psych jargon, we might call this archaic. Primitive is another way to say it. And one of the things about this It World is it's very godlike. What I mean by godlike is things like this. Feelings of omnipotence come out of It World. Feeling like you can do whatever you please. What else comes out of It World? Feelings of omniscience. Things you feel like you know everything. You're a know-it-all. Gosh, how do you spell this word? This is crazy. Omniscience. Omnipresence. These are all the omnis. You feel like you exist everywhere. The world is you, basically. One more omni. What else? Omnibenevolence. Omnibenevolence. Benevolence. I hope this isn't a spelling competition. And that is the feeling of all loving. You deserve all the love in the world. And this is a state of childhood. This is very normal for children. You see this fizzing energy of the It World sort of overcoming the child from time to time. They feel like they're entitled, they deserve everything, they want everything, they even feel like they know everything. This is normal in childhood. And if we go back to, say, the model that the ego must somehow, let's go black. The ego must somehow make its way out of It World to mature. This is the ego. This is I, me. I have to somehow get out of It World. Otherwise, I risk being heavily influenced still in my adulthood by all these things, which, as you know, is not very healthy for adults to be in that kind of state. So the question is how to help the ego move forward, move out. And we explored before that some kind of influence, like a parent, is there to help the child develop, come out like this, move out. And the parent does this through a combination of boundaries, setting rules, and love / warmth / empathy. And what does this do to the ego? It makes it feel safe to emerge out and become its own person. So a combination of these two, the rules and warm, loving empathy, seems to be the best approach to parenting, child rearing. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about the dynamics of these sort of things, the It World, and how the child overcomes the pull of wanting to go back into It World. Now, It World is very appealing to the child because you get all these wonderful feelings here, like you can feel godlike, you feel omnipotent, you feel special, and so on. But we also know that such an ego, if it stays in this kind of thing, is quite childish, to put it bluntly. And so if the ego manages to evolve out of it world. Let's get the ego out a bit here. There. Let's put the ego up here now. There. It's managed to make its way out, but it still needs some kind of connection to it world, because it world is full of your life energy, your mana, as I called it before. So there's a little channel there where mana can still come up into the ego. Now, mana is another funny term that you won't hear psychologists using, but it's very useful because it implies that the ego is always somehow still connected to the it world. Let's put some mana here. And it energizes the ego with mana. And what that really means is things like omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, and so on can still play an influence, can still influence the ego in some way, but in a healthy way. And that's what this video is about today, is understanding healthy versus unhealthy godlike qualities. We'll put godlike here. This is the battle that the ego faces in its development. So this is a healthy on this side, and then on this side, this is the sort of, we'll call it unhealthy. It's not necessarily the best term, but the ego is still kind of submerged here in it world. Let's color it in. There we are. This is we use some jargon, regressed ego. It's regressed back into it world. And this one is more, on this side, more developed here. Okay, let me just change colors there. There's the ego regressed. Now, if the ego is still heavily influenced or submerged or in it world, these qualities here overcome it. It becomes entitled. It becomes a know-it-all. It feels like the world revolves around it. It deserves everything. And we know that if you're trying to talk about good social behaviors, those things will not win you friends or awards. However, over here, where the ego has pulled itself out of it world, it still maintains some connection, tenuously you might say, to it world, and these things still play a role. However, they play a slightly different role. Say in the case of, let's choose omnipotence, which is basically feelings of power. The ego still contains a seed of this, and we'll call them aspirations, or fantasies, secret fantasies, if you like, of power. There we go. In this case, secret fantasies of knowledge or wisdom, secret fantasies of being everywhere at all times, knowing everything at once, and secret fantasies of love. The ego never separates, ever, from these aspirations and fantasies. No matter how unaware of these that you are, they're still there in the background. Over here on this side, these are not aspirations, these are actual manifestations, meaning the ego still literally believes it's the center of the universe. Now, you see this in young children, sort of age 2 to 3, but 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 probably, but you need to, at some point as an ego, outgrow this. Because if you become an adult who is still into this sort of stuff, you will be either a narcissist, power hungry, tyrannical, a know-it-all. You'll just be annoying, basically, to put it bluntly. And if you're talking about social confidence, your social life will always reflect these childish qualities. You will be domineering, or you will be a know-it-all, or, and so on. Whereas this ego here is easier, its social relationships are a lot easier, but it still has these hidden or secret or deep aspirations of these qualities that flavor social interactions. And we're going to talk more about how this flavors our social interactions in later videos. This video is just showing you the motion of the ego up and down into it world and how it relates to these qualities that come straight out of it world. Now, before we finish up, let's look at another example. Just going to clear the screen. Let's look at two adults. Okay, we've got the one here and one here. And we're going to give them two qualities here. This is a very regressed adult, and this one is a mature. Now, what do we expect to see in the regressed? If we just quickly jump back into the model, is the regressed ego, and over here is the mature ego. Let's get the colors quickly back on here. There's all your it energy. Oops. And there is all your it energy here. So this adult here on the right-hand side of the page, the ego is still very heavily influenced by it world. So what do we see? We see it, grandiose, godlike, aspirations, godlike, entitled, tantrums, rages, deluded, all the childish things, and so on. And over here, we see something different. Choose a different color. Yes, lights. Instead of being grandiose, there's self-esteem or positive self-regard. Over here, instead of being godlike, you have aspirations which you hope come true, like dreams for the future. You have ambition. Instead of being demanding the world conform to your every need, you have ambition to work your way towards things that are good for you. Instead of tantrums, you can what? You can have a debate maybe. You can debate, or you can be assertive with people rather than screaming at them. Instead of rages, you can get angry, but you can contain it and measure it out. And instead of being deluded, you are reasonable. Do you see? So there's just a few qualities that we see emerge if the ego can separate itself from it world, yet granted a little connection still, because you need some of that energy flooding into the ego occasionally. But over here, when the ego is regressed, it's still submerged too much in it world as an adult. You see these godlike qualities, which are archaic, primitive, childish, you name it. In terms of what you would imagine a cranky Old Testament God to behave like, that's where you'll see it. And if the ego isn't getting what it wants on this side, it's prone to what? Sulking, depression, a lot of addiction problems, and so on. Whereas this ego here, if it doesn't get what it wants, what does it do? It rests, it reformulates, it asks for help, and so on. Recalibrates it. It sort of accepts what it can change and moves on, whereas this ego does not accept it. Okay, that's enough on the main differences between the mature and the regressed ego. We're going to explore in the next video how the ego can be pulled out of regression by transferring power into other objects and people in the world, a little bit more advanced. Please feel free to join me again for that. Like and subscribe, and as usual, your comments are very welcome. Bye for now.